Hello, Vilnius. Pleasure to be here. My name is Viktoras. I'm a partner at Arnwolf Capital. I'm an engineer by education, having built my own business and now switching to the dark side and running a venture fund. Arnwolf Capital is a deep tech and AI fund, backing companies like Pixevia, Turing College, and Litlit. And it's very fitting that we are in Vilnius, which is the capital of tech in the Baltics, capital of the Baltics maybe. And as some of you may know, Vilnius was established by a Grand Duke, Gediminas, when he heard an iron wolf howling louder than 100 wolves. And that's a legend. And now we know that what he thought is an iron wolf was actually kind of autonomous robot mining lithium. And of course, that's where the name Lithuania comes from lithium mines. Maybe that's a story for another day. So let's maybe start with a quick question for the audience. Question number one, please raise your hand if you have used ChatGPT recently. All right. Now, please raise your hand if you used the Midjourney to generate some images recently. Okay, some hands, not as many hands as ChatGPT. And has anyone used the Notebook LM at all? All right, only 2 or 3 hands. So, highly recommend, check out Notebook LM. It's a very interesting product. It essentially does many things, but one of the interesting things it does is actually generates a podcast from whatever you give it as an input.
So it's kind of like this, but on any interesting topic.
It's kind of like on not even an interesting topic. So the whole point is that it's a boring topic. Like, let's say I upload my LinkedIn PDF, and then it goes into a deep dive about how amazing this person is, or like super kind of cool motivational thing. However, AI is still not good enough to pronounce Lithuanian names, it seems. So let me try. So we have Audrius here. Audrius is from Argyle as a founder and a CTO, and Argyle gives real-time employment data.
Yeah, Argyle.
Argyle, yes. Argyle, yes. And Audrius is also a founder of AI Association in Lithuania. So big hand to Audrius. Thank you. And we also have Karolis Misiūnas, also very AI unpronounceable name, coming here from Zurich. Karolis works at Google DeepMind, and he's building all the cool machine learning products and applications. So we had a bit of a discussion what we want to chat about, but we have to reflect the news. And the news are that OpenAI just raised 6.6 billion on something like 157 billion valuation, which maybe for Karolis is not that exciting because he's running his training and training and running inference on larger clusters. But Audrius, what do you think? Funding rounds like that, like how do they impact what you do at Argyle? Do they impact your ability to hire talent? Do they kind of impact your fundraising trajectory?
Well, First, I think it's really exciting because as a side effect of these rounds, we're going to get back nuclear power. So in some ways, the fact that AI models need so much electricity because of the training, we're going to get the rebirth of the nuclear power, which will mean that electricity for normal use cases will probably be too cheap to meter. The dream that a lot of electricity inventors had early on. A more relevant, I guess, example is that I think this is just the beginning. Given how much training is increasing in cost, how much more GPUs we want to use, we might see another round of 10xing this in the next few years, which is quite amazing. And also it reminds me of the telecom bubble in the 1999, right, where everyone overinvested into fiber and we all got benefits of it. The question is, was it a good investment for them? So time will tell.
Karoli, I wanted to touch base. So we spoke about Notebook LM, and I think it's an interesting kind of paradigm change. What do you think? Could you maybe give us a bit of an overview of kind of what the current models are and what the trends are? What do you think is coming? What should we perhaps expect in the future?
Yeah. So first of all, I am here with my own opinions and not my employers, so take it with a grain of salt. What is changing in AI is intelligence cost is dropping dramatically right now. So we're seeing like something that used to cost a person costing actually automatic inference. Like for instance, we would have automatic podcasters talking to each other, doing notes before. Now the Gemini does the notes and the TTS model speaks them out in a very natural, emotional way that you experience in NodeLM. Notebook LM. So there's a dramatic shift in the cost of intelligence. And I think this is the trend we're going to see. We see drop in prices of the tokens over the next few years, especially when we optimize the models further and when we produce hardware specifically to run these models. This is like other area that I'm really excited is multimodality that is changing dramatically. So Notebook LM is a shift in modalities. You could just ask ChatGPT to print out these dialogue, but it's pretty boring. Humans are naturally multimodal, meaning we see, we touch, we hear. And I'm hoping with the advent of new models, we'll see models that actually can draw videos that are actually pleasant to watch. We already seen some memes online about these videos. They look pretty cool. But I'm hoping to see videos that are butter smooth, transitions, movies about things you imagined and you just typed it in and you see it.
Right. Thank you, Carlo. Odro, from your perspective as a founder and a CTO of a scale-up company, right? So you are at the very forefront of tech innovation as a CTO, as a data company. Does it actually change how you do things other than people kind of copy pasting things into ChatGPT and back? Or, of course, maybe engineers do some Copilot, but is that it? Or do you think there's more? Is there any more change you see kind of coming? Does that allow you to maybe fire all engineers and AI does the whole, work for you? What is happening with like scale up on a scale up side?
So I think it's a really interesting question. First, no, I don't think anyone will be able to fire all engineers. And there's multiple reasons for that. But just to focus on a few more niche use cases that I think will be very interesting. I definitely agree about the multimodality side of things. But the reason I think it will be very exciting is because right now, the way we consume AI is through a screen or a speaker. But essentially, you plug some information into a computer and get some out, without actually sort of taking the information from the real world, but actually taking it from text or internet. As soon as you'll be able to run multimodal models offline on the phone or on a computer and actually capture the crowd here and show their sentiments, as soon as you will be able to get that multimodality locally, there will be a lot more use cases where AI will become challenging the current norms and changing how people live. Right now, if you're a writer, it changed your life, right? But if you work somewhere in the construction or building something, it hasn't really changed your life yet. There's a lot of these multimodalities that haven't been unlocked. So when it comes to us, as a CTO or engineers in our company, we sure use Copilot. We actually built our own AI tools. We just don't like to boast about that because I think AI is like a very useful screwdriver. It can be useful for a specific task, and you should use it for that. But it doesn't mean you need to be an AI company for that. For us specifically, we use code generation for specific code blocks that we have developed. We have developed like a DSP, essentially our own sublanguage of Python for our own use cases. And then you can use offline LLMs to actually generate code from those code blocks really well. So instead of trying to write code from scratch, you limit its ability to be changeable for your own use case. I think that has been really useful for us to debug things. And another use case is, of all things, parsing PDFs better. And people think it's a solved issue. It's actually a really difficult unsolved issue because OCR has been solved, but what hasn't been solved is the contextual information of tables. Multi-nested tables are very easily parsable by humans, are almost unparsable by computers. And a lot of useful information in finance lives in those. So yeah, we have built our own models to tackle that.
So maybe following on a little bit on this, I just recently saw the news, two pieces of news, I guess. There's this company called Klarna, and they are, buy now, pay later company of Sweden, now primarily based in the US. So they recently said something like, well, we're going to replace our customer support staff, with AI. It was like a claim where they made a couple of months ago. And I was like, okay, maybe you can do some of that. But what really got my attention was, I think, over earnings call last week, the CEO said something like, we're actually ripping out Salesforce, and we're going to rebuild whatever we need as our kind of CRM. And Salesforce is kind of this thing which, once you kind of get it, you can't really rip it out. It's fundamentally the record of all the data which is relevant to your biz dev, sales, and maybe even the marketing. Again, from a kind of growth company perspective, do you see any of these changes? Like, do you advocate for, I don't know, your own company ripping out CRMs and doing something kind of in-house?
So first, I would just like to say that Klarna is very good at shock marketing. Their CEO used to have an image of him doing a split in his Twitter profile, and I think that says something about the sort of content he produces there. But if we focus on his technical point, a lot of the business apps businesses use are CRUD apps, right? They're really simple, put data in, get the data out apps. And there's absolutely nothing complicated about them, except that you want to have an SSO method that works for your enterprise or some login methods that are synchronized. It has almost always been cheaper to build your own CRUD apps if you have engineering. It's just gotten easier, and I think they're using that as an excuse. If we look at Salesforce and what it really is, it's a really glorified Excel sheet. It's a really useful, glorified Excel sheet. So you could have really used that before. I think now you can just do it quicker and more easily. Maybe they use that as an opportunity to do so. So maybe it is bad days for CRUD apps after all.
Thank you. Looking a little bit kind of behind it and what is driving it, Karoli, maybe you could tell us a little bit about kind of the fundamentals behind AI and kind of what are the core technologies driving that innovation and the importance of those core technologies.
Yeah, so data is the number one thing that we use in the AI. And the big shift, in my personal view, is that we went from purely structured data about 5, 6, 7 years ago, where we had a label, we have an input, we try to predict the label. We went into these big pre-trained models that understand the world in its structure slowly. And this turns out to be a lot more universal way of extracting knowledge and embedding knowledge in these networks. And this is what we see, image generation models, they're not even that large. If you download them off the web, Stable Diffusion models, they're a few gigabytes, and they basically can draw everything you know. Some people, it will not know, but it will draw everything you can imagine. So all you have seen ever is in a few gigabytes of information. Language models, they're a little bit bigger, but they know vast amount of information that's way more, and they just embed it in this network somehow. My personal hypothesis is right now not very efficient. We're going to change that over many years to come. So the Gemini will keep improving. Competition as well. But the core fundamental is data. And the second one is compute. So compute is a big thing that shifted over the last 20 years thanks to NVIDIA and other companies. Basically, we can now digest that information in finite amount of time and produce one model, one piece of weights. So this is a very interesting idea, and this led to the shift of energy is actually very important. So companies starting to build data centers close to the power plants, and why they're doing it, because half the price of electricity goes to the networks, not the electricity producer. So you undercut the network, you have half the price electricity, you can offer your tokens cheaper. So there's a big shift in the compute and the available data. So data is kind of weird. In my personal opinion, the best data was all up to 2021. Since then, we're really good at poisoning it with the generations of ChatGPT and the images. It's very hard to tell what's real. So if you have some data and mark it with a stamp, it's before 2021. Afterwards, there will be a big transition, and maybe you find your model's not performing as well.
It's probably similar to how they were actually scavenging kind of steel or iron from old
Pre-nuclear steel.
yeah, and from old basically sunken ships because they don't have kind of radiation background in it. So with the kind of foundational models, and obviously the amounts of data and amounts of compute required to train something like that, the amounts are vast, right? So OpenAI's round is a testament to this. I think, let's say, if we zoom in and kind of look a bit closer, the only competitor or player in the field in Europe we have is Mistral.ai. I think QTI is another French lab. But we have a lot of early budding companies here in the audience, a lot of startups. What do you think is a kind of an interesting angle of attack for them, given that they are unlikely to make a big impact when it comes to training foundational models? They are maybe not in a very favorable position where they could get access to a lot of unique data, which only they would have. What do you think? Like, what would you, and both of you, I don't know, like, where would you see an opportunity if you were to do something in the AI space on your own?
So I personally see a split between labs that train their own big or medium-sized models and startups, less of a lab setup where you apply these models. So fundamentally, I've trained a bunch of models. I don't know the full capability of these models. Actually, a lot of these models will be available through APIs, and you can test them yourself and innovate on the solutions and what the models are capable of doing. And this is actually where manpower or sheer will is a lot more important than some sort of big amount of data. So when OpenAI released their ChatGPT for the first time, they didn't know exactly what ChatGPT can do. They had a pretty good idea because they've been playing with it, but people discovered what it's useful for. It's the same with Gemini, all other models. And what we see is that they have hidden capabilities that people discover, and they discover applications for it. So there's, for every foundation model training lab, I think there must be 100 or 1,000 startups that are actually building on top of these models, and maybe have smaller models that actually are safety rails or adapt them solutions to this. And this is much cheaper. Please.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, it's 3 categories. The first one is AI tooling. So anything from trying to essentially cost save for electricity for the models, building testing tooling to compare if your new model is better. That's not trivial. There's obviously solutions for that. The second category, I would say, is how can you take the models and not necessarily distillate them, but run them on, integer 4 kind of hard, run them on max, basically. I mean, not everyone's going to be able to afford $80,000 GPUs. There's a lot of use cases that can be, unlocked if you allow people to run this on their computers. And we have seen Olam and other startups sort of pioneering that space. And I think the third area is just real-life applications for AI. So how can you take that multimodality, as I mentioned, and actually make it useful somewhere here, in this shop, in this office building, rather than trying to make something on the web again?
Models notwithstanding, would you think kind of maybe some sort of vertical specific applications, again, like Argyle, like a product makes a bit more sense or a bit more interesting and a bit more kind of defensible than going into infrastructure? Infrastructure is obviously nice, and as an engineer, I like infrastructure, but at the same time, I would say it's probably much easier to build infrastructure, let's say in the valley, where you have thousands of potential customers straight out of your door.
I mean, I think we're at the time where if you lock yourself into a product, it's very hard to know what's coming next year when the big model comes out. So it's really, really difficult to make a good business case right now while locking yourself in. And there's very few real success cases there. And infrastructure is easier in that way because you're helping to build the thing. You don't know what it's going to be.
One thing that I have about this, you want to build a company that is empowered by a new release of a big foundation model. You don't want to build a company that's competing with it. So think of a solution that, even if it's released and it kind of is in your area, you're not in competition because you're not going to raise what OpenAI just raised. This is an insane amount of money. If you're building a seed series or Series A startup, you want to be empowered by these models. You don't want to compete.
That's a very good point.
Well, maybe advice here is if you decide to build something like that, check with Carlos first, just a background check if it's worth doing or not. So maybe kind of towards wrapping it up, one thing I wanted to ask both of you is, Audrey, you have started the AI Association of Lithuania, and we have a lot of attempts in Europe in general to try to put AI forward, and not only from a regulatory perspective, but from a technical perspective, hopefully as well. What would be your, I guess, advice or guidance to put Lithuania on that kind of technology/AI map, and more so specifically, given that we have parliamentary elections in less than 2 weeks and like in a week? What do you think? If you were the Prime Minister of AI of Lithuania, what would you do?
I'm going to say something controversial here. So I do think that given our security situation in today's geopolitical environment, one thing we should focus on is dual use and military applications of AI. Remove the stigma we have around that and see how that can help us protect ourselves.
So for me, Lithuania is full of talent, but it's not a huge amounts of talent. It's full of money, but it's not huge amounts of money. So we don't want to compete with American or Chinese labs that are extremely well funded and provisioned with talent. I think finding niches that are extremely profitable, but maybe smaller, is a very interesting play for Lithuania in particular. And the reason is that big players normally don't go after these. Google will never come after a really tiny market, or OpenAI. They go for these foundation models. For instance, a very interesting field that turns out to be pretty hard to do well is on-the-edge AI. So when you put the AI models on the watches, you put the AI models on the phones, or even security cameras. These are very useful for security applications, but across the industry. And it turns out it's a very specific skill set that has big markets, but not huge markets. There, for instance, Lithuania has an edge. Leveraging our other strengths, for instance, I know Lithuania is very strong in other sensors and biomedical devices. AI can be not necessarily the only solution, but combined with something else, it's extremely defensible. And we have excellent knowledge in these industries again already. So leveraging that would be very, very powerful and defensible and valuable because of this.
All right. Thank you, Karoli. Thank you, Audriu. Let's give a big hand to our panelists. Thank you.